Chapter 8. Andy stood up and then began walking toward the other two, intending to pass between them. As she did, Derek reached out and gently took hold of her arm. Thoughts centered on the girl in the barn, whom he'd seen only hours before. "Hey, I just want you to know I think you're amazing." She tugged her arm loose without so much as acknowledging his statement. He watched her storm off and then rolled his eyes at Pradicus. "You ever feel like you're being helpful and then someone turns around and makes you feel like a total—" He stopped, electing not to finish the statement. "Never mind," he said in a quiet huff, swatting at a patch of ivy. Andy stopped next to a tree several yards off and rested a shoulder against it. Derek turned to Pradicus. "I guess I'm confused. I don't understand why it's assumed neither of them made it." Pradicus stepped up to Derek, placing his illuminated staff between the two of them. "Things are not always as they seem. This was necessary and needed to surface." "Necessary? Which one? The lie or the truth?" Derek asked. Pradicus offered a meaningful wink and then started toward Andy. Derek grimaced. "Oh man, this is going to get ugly," he thought to himself. From his short distance away, though, he marveled at Pradicus's chivalrous approach toward Andy, a refined undertaking to be sure in his opinion. After making her aware of his proximity, and while facing the opposite direction, Pradicus quietly stood beside her, just as he must have many times before. Standing rigidly, arms crossed, she scarcely turned her face in order to offer a scowl from the corners of her eyes, and then slowly resumed her position. After a moment, he leaned in toward her, made a nonchalant comment, and then glanced off in the other direction. She didn't respond. The two stood silently, the younger seeming barely tolerant of the presence of the older. With one hand, she smoothly ran her fingers through her hair, acting oblivious toward her recently professing collaborator. He stepped around to her opposite side and again conveyed a relatively concise sentiment. She turned her head away and then gazed upward through the ivy and trees and into the graying sky. Pradicus turned his head toward her and once more said something quite brief. Her eyes darted back and forth while she cupped her chin, then, after contemplating his words for a minute, adjusted her posture toward him. She answered him using expressive hand movements and, on one occasion, pointed to the mountain. The two went back and forth for several minutes, until it was only Pradicus motioning his hands and arms, with Andy keeping a determined stance, arms crossed once again. A moment later, she wiped a tear from her cheek and re-engaged into the conversation with a softer bearing. The two continued for another minute, and then Pradicus turned and started back toward Derek. Derek heard Andy say, "Wait," then watched her approach Pradicus with a firm embrace. How did he do that? Derek asked himself. The two returned to Derek. "Derek, I'm sorry you saw me like that," Andy said, walking toward him, stopping short. She held out her arms in a gesture for a hug. "Please don't apologize. I can't imagine what you're dealing with," Derek answered, wrapping his arms around her. She rested her head on his shoulder and said nothing for a good minute. "You must hate who I've become. I'm so sorry," she finally whispered. "Are you kidding?" He caressed her back. "I meant what I said a few minutes back. You really are amazing." She stepped away from him and immersed herself into his eyes. A small grin cracked at either edge of her mouth. "Derek, I'm so glad you're here." With Derek still palming the phone, she broke away from his eyes to glimpse down at it. "Why do I feel guilty for missing him so much?" she asked in a tender tone. Derek took her by the chin and raised her eyes to meet his once again. "If I were him, I'd feel pretty honored right about now," he whispered. Her lips steadily split into a brightly lit smile for but a moment. Then she turned back to Pradicus. "Again, I'm sorry." Pradicus shrugged it off. "As am I." "So how much time did Jake spend here? I mean, in this century?" Derek asked. Andy peeked at the phone again. "I really don't know," she answered in a hushed voice. "He stayed here with us for about 4 months, I'd say. I guess he showed up about 6 months before me and then took off on his own for a while. I was here when he came back." Pradicus nodded. He was a science geek, Andy continued. He actually taught Pradicus quite a few things. Wait a second, Derek interjected. Isn't that kind of bad? I mean, don't we now have to worry about the changing of the future and all that? Well, maybe, she answered a bit more upbeat. I suppose the future, as well as the past that you and I knew, could be somewhat different once we return. I mean, is it possible that we'll turn in our history books to the chapters on the Enlightened Ages, rather than the Dark Ages, all because of how Pradicus here changed the world? An amused grin broke at one side of Pradicus's mouth, which allowed Andy to find her cheer again. Suddenly, they all broke into a brief stint of laughter. The familiar sound of Derek's laugh and the presence of his humor so thrilled Andy that her countenance took on a glow that an instant later radiated throughout her entire being. Derek, I have no idea, she continued. But really, how much has Velicious changed the future by abducting people from all time eras? It seems all screwed up to me. You know what? Don't make me think about that, okay? But Derek answered, only to be cut short by a firm finger in his face. Pradicus chuckled, turning slightly away. Anyway, she said, lowering her finger. Jake told Pradicus about NASA, satellites, space shuttles, and man walking on the moon. That was a hard sell, let me tell you. He also taught him about the solar system, the Earth being round, dinosaurs and all sorts of other things. Wow, wish I had him for a tutor in school. How old was he? Andy put on a small grin and looked away. You know what? It's not important, Derek said, kicking himself. No, it's all right. Well, he intrigued me. Intrigued you, Derek asked, speculating on how deep or shallow a statement that was. What does that mean? Derek, the future is so amazing. I know it's not too far from where we're from, but the changes in politics, technology, school, just everything. He described a world so different from what you and I know. It doesn't seem possible that so much could change 10 years from where we were. But my goodness, Derek, all coins are collector's items where he was from because money's all digitally controlled. Wallets don't exist anymore because all information is stored under the skin. He showed me. The chip and scar were no larger than a freckle. She was about to continue when she realized her enthusiasm wasn't reciprocated. She shrugged her shoulders. He intrigued me. Then she remembered his question. Oh, and by the way, he was 19 and already 3 years out of college. He said that with the exception of either lower income or ultra-rich districts, most all kids took classes online with automated instruction that adjusted to each individual. Because of this, students have the opportunity to combine 2 years into one starting in 6th grade. He frowned with a raise of the eyebrows, wondering what part she was so amused with. Geez, Derek, you might try showing some respect, or how about a little compassion? Or maybe you should try on some concern, because if he didn't make it out of here with a brain his size, you may very well end up just like him, or worse. She stepped up to him and snatched away the phone, and then immediately swung her head around so as to flip her hair in his face. Derek wasn't sure if the look on Pradicus's face was more from amusement or surprise. Her turning and walking away was something he'd experienced hundreds of times over the past couple of years. But watching her walk away this time was different. Her sway, her gait, how the breeze and the sunlight caught her hair, the way she carried herself, everything about her walking away was older. The realization that she truly had been there for 18 months began to set in. He stopped and tried to imagine what life must have been like through her eyes, every day looking into the horizon with a longing for his arrival, wondering if the beast would ever catch up to her, losing the luxuries of modern living overnight, dealing with the possibility of never seeing her family again, and on he went, drawing up challenges she surely must have endured. Suddenly this Jake character fit into the picture, and it all made sense. What else could she have latched onto? How did the hope she held continue to carry on for so long? I'm sure he made it back, Andy. If he's everything you say he is, he had to have made it. I mean, it's guys like me that end up getting the axe. This Jake guy is starting to sound like someone I wish I was. She sat down, legs crossed. Of course he made it, she replied. He's awesome. But that recording, she said, looking off toward the ground. Then, as if trying to work things out in her mind, she rationalized somewhat audibly. He must have made that recording the same day he left us. He said he was going to go back through the wormhole, and I told him I wasn't going to go with him. Remember, Pradicus? Pradicus drew his thoughts upon the memory and, with the smallest glimmer in his eye, nodded. Chapter 9.